Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today we have a friend of the Susan Brender Show on again. His name is Daniel Goodenough, and he's the author of the recently released book of fiction called The Caravan of Remembering, a roadmap for experiencing the awakening of your life's mission. He's been a professional musician, a research scientist, and a graphic designer. In the past 30 years, he's taught thousands of students through the Way of the Heart program to discover their authentic life's path and to walk that path in the world. Recently, he's been consulting with companies to help them do business differently, responding to today's changing business environment with mindfulness, integrity, and heart. I want to welcome you, Daniel, again to the Susan Brender Show. It's been a pleasure having you, and I'm sure this show's going to be equally as wonderful.
Thank you for having me on. I often enjoy it.
Okay, let's really get down to brass tacks here, Daniel. You know, we're living in a society today where a lot of people are very angry. A lot of people are really cynical and upset about what's going on in the government. There's a lot of discord and instability in our country at this time, as you must know. Now, how can people find out their calling if they're depressed or experiencing problems like joblessness or insecurity? What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I might start with saying that why starts everything. You know, why is at the root of all good things. So you could say two things about that: of what are you giving your attention to, and what kind of questions are you asking yourself, and if what you're giving your attention to, and the questions you're asking are leaving you with a sense of helplessness or depression, then you might imagine that it's possible that you could refocus your attention on something that would give you a why. So the conversation about why are you here, what does that call you to do, and who does that call you to be might be the thing that would say, in spite of what's going on in the world, in my life, what am I here for? And it may be that if you plug into the why are you here and what does that call you to do and who does that call you to be, you might find the why. You might either say, it's not my stewardship to address that particular thing, and I do have something I am called to do, or it might be that, yes, I can see that if I'm going to feel differently about this, I need to get involved. And getting involved either way and why you're here would give you a different relationship to what you see happening in the world. And
yeah. But Daniel, I have some thoughts about that because I've spoken to so many different people. There are various groups and conferences and meetings that I've had with people, and there is this selfishness. It's like, well, I'm getting old. In some cases, this is what people talk about. I'm getting older, and who wants me anymore? Who cares about me? I mean, that insecurity and that sense of, like, lack of hope is something that people are dealing with. I mean, we live in a society today where the computer, the digital, age has taken over, and it's taken over our jobs. In addition to which, not only is it taking over our jobs, it's making us feel that one of these days, we're going to have to make some changes, and it's very hard when you reach a certain point in your life. Well, what do you say to that?
Well, I would come back to what kind of questions are you asking yourself, and what are you, it could be what are you saying to yourself. There's always a question behind that. So if getting old, you could say, so what kind of questions would you have to be asking yourself that getting old has you feeling like nobody cares? And so you might say, in that case, a little more capital S selfishness would be helpful. In other words, who am I? What is myself? And what am I called to do with the time I've got left? You can go quietly into the night, as they say, and you could focus on your failing health, or you could focus on what are you called to do with where you are and what you've got to offer. And, there is this phenomena that happens that when people get in touch with their why, when they get in touch with purpose, quite frequently the health is affected in a positive way by that. So whatever symptoms you're dealing with, whatever low self-esteem might be by itself there or there because of a felt sense of increasing sickness or whatever, you can focus on that and have that disempower you, in which case it becomes self-fulfilling. Or you can say, well, I am here, and what am I going to do with the rest of the time I have? And, you know, in my work in doing the life mission work with people, I've seen people do amazing things at every age.
That's right. You know, I was once told that most of the multimillionaires actually made their money after they were age 50, which is a kind of interesting thing, but I don't know that at this time in our lives that's possible because of the changes. You know, we went through an industrial revolution, and now we're going through a digital revolution, and as a result of that, that's where the insecurities lie for a lot of people because they don't understand, you know, what it is that they can do for their life's path. Now, if you were just, let's kind of open this up to this. If you were sitting beside somebody who wanted your advice, and they were talking to you about how, you know, they're so worried and concerned about their mission because they don't know what it is, give me a scenario, give me a story, maybe one that you've already had with somebody, something that really reflects what it is that you would do when having a discussion with that person.
Well, the first step always is to change the story about their life period and change the story about life mission. There's a prevalent idea that only the lucky few get to understand why they're here, and my approach is always that this is like everything else in life, it's skill development. So if you haven't learned the skill of identifying why you're here and what that calls you to do and who you're called to be, then it's a matter of doing the practice like anything else. If you wanted to be an elite athlete, there are practices. If you wanted to be an elite musician or an elite artist or a visual or performing artist of any nature, there are always practices to do to become skillful in the thing that you want to become masterful in, and that includes knowing why you're here and being able to embody and step into that. So whatever age you are and whatever your life situation is, you can always engage in the practices. And once you're clear about your why, what, and who, the how is much easier to be present to. And, you know, that the second step of that is our action vocabulary. What I would always share with someone is that most people, because it isn't, again, something that's skill developed, will have their favorite 2, 3, maybe 5 ways they take action on something. And so that's a limited action vocabulary. And what I would say is, along with doing the practices to understand your why, what, and who, to understand the what you could do in the world and who you would have to become to step into that and who you become by stepping into it, there is this development of the skill itself of taking action to expand your action vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I would work with them on that.
I hear you, and I want to kind of jump to, and it's a sad thing that I'm jumping to this, but I think it's an important issue, and that is the issue of illness. You know, we hear about the most incredible, horrible things going on in people's physicality, if you will. I don't know any other word to use for that, where people are dealing with a lot of cancer. Of course, the number one killer in society is supposed to be heart disease, but there's a lot of people, and more seem to be just popping up, even with new advances in medicine. So how do you recommend that people take the first step in navigating through the tough issues, like a difficult illness, to explore their mission?
Well, the first thing is to take control how you're being in relationship with the physical symptoms you're engaging with. To some degree, and in many cases, the negativity becomes self-fulfilling. You know, so not to engage in magical thinking or anything, to just say, what's the reality of my situation? And first of all, there is this phenomena of being given their life sentence, meaning you have 3 months to live, you have 12 months to live, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then finally giving themselves permission to go for their why, and then finding that they go into remission. So I'm not saying that would happen to everyone. What I would say is that whatever it is that you're confronted with, there are, you could be clear about the full range of both allopathic and homeopathic ways of addressing it, that we might find that more and more a broad spectrum of approaches is helpful, and that you might say, again, what's my why, what's my intention, and how do I, first of all, what's the kindest thing I could say to myself right now in terms of empowering questions? What's the kindest thing I could say to myself right now? And then what would be the empowering questions I could ask so that it doesn't become self-fulfilling? We know that when you dwell on the negative aspect of something, it only makes it worse. And it's disempowering to do so. And the more empowering you can be, the more you can be your own advocate in the health system, and you might engage in all of the avenues that we have out there. And you won't do that unless you, A, feel like in spite of what's happening, there's still something you can do. And, and given that, and here's the thing, we left the industrial age and entered the information age, which had, I guess you could call the upshoot of that would be the digital age, but really it's the context stage. We entered into the context stage, which means there's way more information than any one person could soak up in 10 lifetimes. So then if there's no limit to the amount of information that almost everybody has available to them, then the question is, which information would I care about and why would I care about that?
Yeah.
So the benefit of being in the context age is that regardless of your circumstance and regardless of your physical ability to move about the cabin, as they say, in the context age and given the digital access we have, if there was ever a time that you could make a living by being creative and doing and being engaging in why you're here, this would be it. If you can say to anyone about anything, why would you care about that, and you have a way of articulating that, then anyone could do that through the internet these days. So again, it's what's my intention? What's my stewardship? What am I here to share? And what can I create a context for anyone out there that aligns with my reason for being here? And if you do that, it's been well documented that has a huge beneficial effect on your health.
You remember the book Tuesdays with Maury, which was a very, very popular book several years ago, where Maury, who had a horrendous disease, had conversations with Mitch Albom, who ultimately wrote the book, Tuesdays with Maury's. And the thing about Maury, which I thought was really incredible, was that Maury had such an incredible personality that he saw the happiness, he saw the benefits of certain kinds of ways of thinking, and he shared that with the ultimate author of his book. And it was stunning. It was so interesting because here was a person who you knew would be suffering. Not only suffering, but certainly on his way to his path of death, excuse me, and yet he had such a positive attitude. What do you attribute to the fact that there are some people who are able to see through some of the negativity and some of the cynicism that exists in their lives?
Well, I think it was James Hillman that said, it's not so much the damaging things that happen to us in our life, it's the damaging story we tell ourselves about what happened. So I always like to point out that we always have the opportunity to look for the high story. We have this word called history. And I would say that rather than his story or even her story, what would be the most empowering thing to be present to? What's the high story of our story? And I think it was Daniel Siegel in his work with whole brain awareness, and he was articulating 8 domains of brain integration. And one of the symptoms of a healthy mental state is the ability to be present to the narration or the story we're telling ourselves about our life. and to have the ability to tell the story of our life or tell the story of where we're going or what we're called to in a way that empowers us, that has us feel connected, that has us feel like there's purpose and that we're making the world a better place, even if it's just for the people around us, and that we then are able to up-level what we call our memories, and that connected with having some awareness of our awareness and where we're going, and holding our attention to an intention that draws us toward meaning, then gives us a higher state of what's called temporal awareness. Temporal awareness is, and temporal integration means that I'm not so afraid of being uncertain of what I'm certain of. I'm not so afraid of being, of the precariousness of life. That, temporal awareness, that is about time. How much time do I have left? It's maybe that we think more about that as we get older, but there's no guarantee. Early when I started traveling and teaching classes, the person who had brought me in to do the talk was in her 60s. She had a granddaughter who was 13. Her granddaughter, who was 13, was dying and died shortly after I got to know them, and she was an amazing 13-year-old. She had that attitude you were just talking about. I'm just saying there's no guarantee for any of us. So the temporal aspect of our life is we could go at any time.
Yeah,
so if you're not afraid of that and you're connected to meaning, then you're empowered to create an uplift for yourself and the people around you and connect.
So if I gather what you're saying also is, say you're, as you said about this woman in her 60s who had a 13-year-old who she knew was going to die, and somebody whom she loved, somebody who was so, really incredibly lovely, that the time that she had to spend with her was really productive because she had a positive attitude, correct? I would assume that her attitude was that this is what life's path is doing for my grandchild, but on the other hand, with the time that we can spend together is very valuable, and therefore is what her mission was.
Well, yes. Well, the 13-year-old granddaughter was an inspiration to everybody around her. And so, again, that inspiration comes from connecting to meaning. And that, by the way, is called existential intelligence.
Define that for us.
So we're all familiar with IQ. We took IQ tests growing up, most of us, and that was supposed to gauge our intelligence. And since then, we've added to the menu, we say emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence, and now we have spatial intelligence that we might say is visual, like artists. Visual artists are said to have high spatial intelligence, and authors have high linguistic intelligence, and we have this thing called cognitive intelligence. And existential intelligence is the ability to be present to meaning, to create meaning and be present to meaning. And that's the thing about everyone's life mission, is every human being has certain universals that we all have access to. We're all meant to move through certain structures of mind. We're all meant to have access to certain states of mind. We're all meant to have access to a number of things. The thing that makes us unique, though, are the lines of development. And that would be for instance, there's a thing called culinary intelligence that's been added to the menu. So if you felt a calling to be a chef or to run a restaurant or to work with food in some way, the natural involvement in that up-levels your, in this case, your culinary intelligence. And the unique piece of that for each person is we each have a unique combination of those kinds of intelligence. The universal aspect of existential intelligence, though, is like cognitive. Existential intelligence, cognitive intelligence, those are universals that as all the lines of development move upward, that also moves upward. So that, again, if you were feeling less healthy or less optimistic about life, the engagement in you, the line of development, the kind of intelligence or the combination of intelligences that were born in you those lines of development naturally become more meaningful as they up level. So just to say that I may not be that connected to it, my meaning now, if I just go for where my passion is, what my attention is drawn to, my inclination, my fascination, then the innate existential intelligence, along with emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence and cognitive intelligence, will up level, and our sense of why and our intention about that will engage, and that will have us be more engaged in life.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the word passion. You know, I'm excuse me, I'm going to make you laugh for a second, because sitting in front of me as we speak is a ukulele. Somehow, I don't know why I thought about this, but I did, and I can't help but just relating it to you. You know, I have this ukulele sitting here, and for a long time I've said, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to play the ukulele? And every time I look at it, I kind of say, well, you know, am I passionate about this? Because if I'm not passionate about it, I think it would be very difficult to really be engaged and also persistent about learning, which is very necessary to really be able to do it very well. So that's why I love that word passion, because when you are passionate about something, which I am with regard to doing what I do, and I'm sure you feel the same way about doing what you do, this is what creates for us a kind of sense that we have lots and lots of opportunities that we can make a difference in life for a lot of people. I just wanted to point that out to you. But I also wanted to know another thing. You know, families today live all over the world. It's very rare that you have a family in one area, as they did years and years ago, where the family was the center of their lives and they were able to engage in all kinds of activities together, because they lived like a block away from one another in these, you know, urban societies for the most part, and even in some, you know, country societies. Today, that's not the case. So how do you get family to understand that it is so necessary to have a relationship that is so pleasant and so productive, a relationship that can really be meaningful to everybody? What do you say to that?
Well, I guess there's two aspects of that. Getting your family to be on board with your dream for your life is one thing, and getting them to just understand that it's important to have connection and uplift each other are, you know, those are different conversations. I think in terms of whether or not they support you in going for your dreams, or just the idea that it's important to connect with your why, and, you know, why am I here, and that if I have a passion for something, it's important I do that. If you're engaged in your passion and your ignition has you present to that every day, I think we're a little less vulnerable, perhaps, to the aspersions of family, because we know we love what we love and we're engaged in what we love, and there's a certain fulfillment of that that's a little bit of a cushion with the family, and I think that makes us more compassionate. When we love what we do and we're engaged in the pursuit of what we feel will make us feel alive, I think we have more space to be compassionate with family who may or may not be feeling that themselves, or maybe feeling like they have a better idea for your life. And so, you know, it's that Gandhi thing of be the change you're looking for in the world. And, you know, I think about Maya Angelou and Oprah used to share that, the idea of in the face of no agreement. If you're clear about your why and you're engaged in your why, you have enough space to be more compassionate about people, maybe less concerned about what you're up to and why you're up to it.
Yeah, no, I'm listening to you talk about other people, but what about Daniel Goodenough? What is your why?
Well, my why is to help people remember why they're here and actually step into it. And so, you know, the why are you here? What does that call you to do? And who does that call you to be? And then how do you do that? And then how do you do that artfully, beautifully, sacredly, and skillfully? So that's been my passion my entire life. I can't remember a point in my life when that wasn't my why. And that sustained me through times of doing day jobs I wasn't thrilled about, and times that maybe that weren't as economically flowing as other times. And as long as I was clear about and whether there were people in my life that maybe even not only didn't care that I did what I did, but maybe were even oppositional to it. And just like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, and this is what I need to do. So, bless your heart.
Yeah. Are you positive about what is going to happen in the future with regard to our nation, with all the things that are going around? There are so many people who are so negative. I started the show talking about that because I think it's important that people, converse, that they have discussions together to create a society where people are not so cynical and not so angry. Now, I'm just pointing that out, that I think this is something that you are perfect for, kind of giving them your calling, which is to help them navigate through tough issues and difficult times. But how old is too old to flex your wings and reinvent yourself, in your opinion?
I don't think there's a too old ever. I think I shared in a previous interview the story of the lady who was a dean of a nursing school, and in her 80s and in her 90s was still reevaluating her mission and going for it.
Yes.
So I don't think there's such a thing. And again, especially in the context age we're in, if you can provide a context for someone about the thing you care about, why they should care about it, and how you can help them, if they care about it, pursue it, there's a place for you in our time. So I don't think it's about, being young and agile is the requirement. The requirement is, are you connected to your why, and do you have a sense of how that might help other people with their why and why they should care about it? If you can provide the context for that, there's a market for it. We're in the context age, and and the internet has provided the market for that worldwide. So there's never a point where you can't do it. And
how can someone reach out to their community to express their talents to help others? Because needless to say, communities seemingly are disappearing in a sense. Maybe I'm wrong about that, and I'd love to know what you think about that. But really, truly, I think it would be important to understand that the community is a place where you can really express your talents. Any thoughts, again, about that?
Well, I would say two things. That community, in a certain way, has been disappearing, and what I have the sense of now is a turnaround both in outer community and virtual community. So we had the rise of what's called the plural meme and the power to convene. So you have the rise of internet communities. So many communities have gone virtual, and then in just the recent past, I'm seeing that turn around, so that people, it's coming back to in person again. So the rise of political activism is now creating new communities, and the rise of the sense of we really do need to do something about climate change is giving rise to in the world physical outer communities as well. So I think both are happening. And so again, coming from you might engage with social media, but it might be that there's local physical communities engaged in the thing that you care about. And then the thing is, if you're clear about your life mission, then you can say, what's my stewardship? Within this mission, what's my stewardship? And once again, intention and attention. Your intention is the blueprint. Your attention is the energy to manifest that intention. So if you're clear about your intention and you hold your attention to that intention, you will see that you start to notice things that are aligned with your intention. And following that alignment, you will find that you'll meet people, like real people, in person, and you might meet people on the internet. And, there's LinkedIn and all those kinds of things, Snapchat. It's like, so I would say that rather than try to figure that out so much, is be really clear about your life mission. There's a kind of magnetism from that. And if you hold your attention to the intention to step into that, let's say your innate radar, so to speak, will have you, of the 10,000 things you might notice in a given day, you notice certain things. And when you notice those things, track that, write it down, be present to it, and you'll start to see a pattern in that, and that pattern will have you going out and talking to a certain person or researching a certain thing or taking a class. And if you follow through the thing that shows up by noticing what you notice around the things that you're inclined to, that you may have a passion about, so I would say do the practices that help you get clear about your why, what and who, and then hold your attention on that and follow the thread of that. In newspapers, reporters call that collecting string. They get that kind of a sense of a story, but they can't really articulate it yet, but they follow the string. They call it collecting string. So it's kind of like collecting string about your life mission, and in the process, that will have you talk to somebody or take a class or read a book. So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah. My guest today has been Daniel Goodenough, the author of the recently released book of fiction, Caravan of Remembering, a roadmap for experiencing the awakening of life's mission. He's an amazing guest. He's been on our show several times, and each time I find him fascinating, and I'm sure you would too. Now, Daniel, if they want to get in touch with you, they'd like you to be a speaker for their organization or their corporation or whatever, or for just a community group, how do they do that?
Well, they could reach me through thewayoftheheart.com. That's the website for the work we do on that level. The book site is the Caravan of Remembering.com, and if you wanted to follow that, you could go to the Caravan of Remembering.com, and if you wanted to do some of those practices I talked about and you want to do that in community, speaking of that, you could go to the caravanconversation.community site, and then you could go to caravanconnectionsunlimited@gmail.com to get the newsletter.
Do you travel to different places to give talks?
I'm currently going, pretty much all over Canada and the United States at the moment.
That's terrific.
And I just wanted to mention also the Caravan of Remembering is available on iTunes and Amazon and Kindle, and the virtual version, you can get the hard copy at Amazon.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much again for being on the Susan Brender Show. As always, it's a pleasure, and I wish you all the luck in the world, and I think that your attitude will reflect the success that will feed back to you. So thanks again, Daniel, for being with me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.